Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defense Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister.
I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, I think, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance. But, Mr. Speaker, look, if you take the numbers for this financial year and then the numbers for the financial year 27-28, that's £13.4 billion increase. That is the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War, which will put us in a position to ensure the security and defence of our country and of Europe.
Britain's politics just exploded in Parliament today. A ferocious battle erupted as Keir Starmer was put under the spotlight, questioned on where the billions in funding will come from. But as expected, Starmer dodged and twisted his answers, leaving everyone frustrated. Even worse, the Prime Minister's defense budget announcement has sparked a storm, with numbers being thrown around like confetti. £6 billion? £13.4 billion? No one seems to have a straight answer. And if that wasn't enough, British workers are now facing a crippling new tax hike that could slash salaries and force businesses to cut jobs. So what's really going on? Why is the government playing with numbers? And how will these new taxes impact you? Stay with us as we break down the chaos unfolding in British politics and expose the truth behind these shocking decisions. But before we dive in, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to join our fast-growing community. Let's get started. Prime Minister's questions today turned into an all-out war as Keir Starmer went on the attack, demanding answers on defense spending and funding sources. The Prime Minister fired back.
It wasn't very clear. How is it that the Defense Secretary says £6 billion and he says £13.4 billion? The IFS said today that the government is playing silly games with numbers. How does he find this difference in numbers?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we went through this 2 weeks ago, going through the same question over and over again. So let me say it. If you take the financial year this year, and then you take the financial year for 2027-28, the difference between the two is £13.4 billion. That's the same answer. If you ask again, I'll give the same answer again.
But his answers only fueled more confusion. Just yesterday, the Prime Minister proudly announced a £13.4 billion increase in defence spending. But this morning, his own Defense Secretary contradicted him, stating the actual figure was only £6 billion.
It wasn't very clear. How is it that the Defense Secretary says £6 billion and he says £13.4 billion? The IFS said today that the government is playing silly games with numbers. How does he find this difference in numbers?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we went through this 2 weeks ago, going through the same question over and over again. So let me say it. If you take the financial year this year, and then you take the financial year for 2027-28, the difference between the two is £13.4 billion. That's the same answer. If you ask again, I'll give the same answer again.
Mr. Speaker, someone needs to tell the Prime Minister that being patronising is not a substitute. It's not a substitute for answering questions. It's not a substitute. He hasn't answered. What he has said is different from what he said yesterday. We are still not clear where the money is coming from. We want to support him. He's also said that we should put British troops on the ground in Ukraine. We haven't seen the detail of any proposals. Would his new spending plans allow him to fund this commitment effectively?
This massive discrepancy has left analysts baffled. Even the Institute for Fiscal Studies accused the government of playing silly games with numbers. So what's the truth? Is the government inflating figures to mislead the public?
It's the same question again. It's £13.4 billion. That's the difference between this year and 2020. She asked a serious question about the security guarantees in Ukraine, and that is extremely important because the worst of all outcomes, if there's to be a cessation of hostilities, is that it is a short break rather than sustained and lasting peace. And I think that that means there's got to be security guarantees. I've indicated that we will play our full part. There has to be US backing because otherwise I don't think it will deter Putin. We are working on that. I'm having extensive discussions about it, not in a position to put details before the House as she well knows today, but I'll continue down that route because I want a lasting peace in Ukraine and Europe for the safety and security of Ukrainians, of Europeans, and of course for everybody in this country.
Mr. Speaker, this is an endeavour that we want to support him in, but we need to know exactly what it is we're supporting. We need clarity and transparency over the money. We also need to know where this money is going. This morning, the Defense Secretary could not say if the Chagos deal would come out of the defence budget. Can he confirm to the House that none of the defence uplift includes payments for his Chagos deal?
When pressed on funding sources, Starmer gave his usual non-answers, dodging questions like a seasoned politician. The public deserves to know where this money's coming from. Higher taxes, more borrowing, or are vital services at risk of cuts?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the additional spend I announced yesterday is for our capability on defence and security in Europe, as I made absolutely clear yesterday. The Chagos deal is extremely important for our security, for US security. The US are rightly looking at it. When it's finalised, I'll put it before the House with the costings. The figures being bandied around are absolutely wild of the mark. The deal is well over a century. But the funding I announced yesterday is for our capability to put ourselves in a position to rise to a generational challenge. That is what that money is all about. And I thought she supported it.
We need to make sure we are supporting a plan that is clear and transparent. Yesterday, the Prime Minister set an ambition for defence spending to reach 3% in the next Parliament. We agree with him. But this could be 2034, almost a decade away. That is too slow. We don't know how he will pay for it. We cannot raise taxes further. We already paid more on debt interest than defence, and everyone in this House would have heard him not answer the last question. So I will ask him again, is he paying for the Chagos deal with this defence uplift or not?
She's dealt with that question. She gave her the money announced yesterday is going to our capability to put ourselves in a position to defend the security of our country, Europe and the UK. And she asked about defence spending. She gave what people have described as a rambling speech yesterday when she couldn't say what defence spending should be. We've been absolutely clear. We've set it out, a full, credible, costed plan, and I thought she supported it.
Holly Billington.
And yet, despite being the leader of the opposition, even Starmer himself refuses to give clear answers. The Prime Minister also hinted at deploying British troops to Ukraine. But here's the catch. There are no clear plans, no funding details, and no guarantees of success. If Britain commits troops, does that mean direct involvement in war? And will taxpayers be forced to foot the bill for yet another costly conflict? Meanwhile, a devastating tax hike is looming. The government is raising employer national insurance contributions, putting businesses under immense financial strain. The result? Pay cuts, hiring freezes, and mass layoffs. Shockingly, 33% of UK companies are already slashing salary increases for 2025. This means that your paycheck could shrink even as inflation continues to squeeze household budgets. So let's put it all together. A government throwing around contradictory spending figures, an opposition leader avoiding crucial funding questions, potential troop deployment with no clear plan, and British workers facing wage cuts and job losses. This is not just political theater. This is your future at stake. The question is, who can you trust? Britain is at a crossroads. Between unanswered questions on defense spending, a mystery budget, and looming tax hikes, the public is being kept in the dark. Today's PMQs expose just how much politicians are dodging accountability. And the worst part? The decisions they make now could impact your job, your wages, and even your security. What do you think about today's shocking revelations? Is the government being honest with the British people? Or is this just another example of politicians playing games with our future? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, smash that like button and subscribe for the latest updates on British politics. Stay informed, stay ahead. See you in the next video.